Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. This is my 1.0 playthrough where I attempt to load balance all my factories. For some reason, this is what I call fun. In the last episode, I combined some of my extra polymer resin that was just being sunk around the world with a lot of the oil on the west coast to create over 5,000 rubber per minute. Today, I'll be adding on to this new west coast factory. I'm going to need to gather over 6,000 iron ore, 2,000 limestone, and 1,800 aluminum ingots, and a handful of other things to create these frames. By the end of the video, I'll have 50 modular frames, 24 heavy modular frames, and 36 fused modular frames being sent to the nearby train station to be used in future projects. And there's the rubber factory. We are going to add some more to that platform. So here I am right here, right at the edge of the coast. Going that way just takes you right into the grassy fields. But right below me are some nodes. Let's take a look. So this one's up here. That one's up here. Maybe one more right over here. And that one's up here. All right. And I think there's actually two more that I need. Just right around the corner here. There's a pure limestone. And then right over here should be one more. Where is it? Here it is. Yes. Alright, all pure, which is excellent. And there's a copper node that I'm sure I'll use later for something. But for now, I just need the iron and the limestone. So this is the first step. I'm going to create a little miner housing on all 5 of these nodes, and I am going to create a belt bus to bring those over to the factory, because this is close enough to where belting just makes more sense. However, this isn't all the ore that I need. That's all the limestone. But unfortunately, this is only half of the iron. I need 3 more pure nodes, or the equivalent to that. Let's jump ahead to where I have this done, and then we'll talk about the next nodes. And about an hour later, I've got all this done. Let's start at the end and work our way back. So we've got the 2 pure limestone nodes. Those are just being built straight across. So I'm going to use the full 1,200 limestone out of both of these. So we're just going to have these group up. I color coordinated the belt so I could tell the difference between the limestone and the iron, since they're all going to be marked 6. However, with the iron, 1120 is just an easier number to work with. I'm going to be using the pure iron ingot. So taking a look at the recipe, we need to use this in increments of 35 unless I want to do some under or overclocking. So 1200 divided by 35 would be not a convenient number of machines. However, I could just place 35 and underclock them. That wouldn't be the biggest deal. However, this is the amount that I would get out. And when load balancing is concerned, that is just not a number I realistically want to work with. However, if we change this to 1120, we get a nice even number of 2080. And we get a nice even number of machines of 32. And 32 is just one of those really great numbers to work with for load balancing. So we're just going to clock them to 1120 and just make life a lot easier on myself. So all of the belts come into this last little miner housing, and then they all leave through here to a bus. And everything just gets bussed over here, and then we drop it down, bring it out a little bit farther, drop it down to the ocean floor, and that's how far we've made it. Not exactly sure where it's going to get plugged in, so I figured that's close enough. And this will give me a way to run the power out to all of these miners. I can just run power along this thing. It'll be nice and easy. Well, that's not all the iron I need, so if we ping for some more iron, let's take a look. Yeah, not real close. So we've got another one, which is pure. So that's good. Pure and impure. Well, I know the grassy fields just has tons. Not a lot of pure nodes, but it's got a ton of iron. Let's jump in the train and head right on over there. I'm going to add a radar tower to make things a little bit easier out here. So the plan for out here is there's obviously some ore just right here. And even if these are all impure, 4 of them is enough. Okay, impure, impure. Oh, Yep. All right, well, 4 impure equal a pure. So that's 1. The other pure node is just right on this ledge here somewhere. So that's just on the other side of the train station. So that's 2. So now I just need 1 more. I think if we just head right past this. Oh man, it's been so long since I've been out here. The starting area looks so much different when you can start flying around versus when you very first start the game and you're just stuck running around without even blade runners. Such a different feeling. Hey, go away. Alright, so we've got a normal. Well, that's all we need right there, but okay, so 3 normal. So what I'll do is I'll group up these 2 normal, group up those 4 impure, and then we'll grab that pure node, and that should be all of the iron I need. Got a stripe of fix-it walls there, didn't I? Well, gonna have to fix that too. And now these 2 are done. So on the lower level, because these aren't just at the same height, unfortunately, we've got 2 of them. And then we've got these 2 up here. And then to hopefully make all of the merging easier, I merged up 2 of them together, and then 2 of them, and then those 2. It's basically load balancing the mergers, but in some circumstances, when you're going onto a Mark 6 belt, I actually think this is just the better way to do it than manifolding the mergers. Most of the slower belts can handle it just fine, but for whatever reason, I think this just works best with Mark 6 so far. Or at least that's what I've noticed for me. So that's the 4, and then I'm just doing basically the same thing, just grouping those 2 up. They're getting bussed over here, and then those are both just going straight up into the train station. Just barely. And I did add a radar tower, like I mentioned. Had to color it green because, well, it's the grassy fields. Now it's so much easier to see everything. I do still need to add the Mark III miner and the belt bus to grab the pure node, but that one's just super easy to do. And I think I want to work on the next major logistics problem for this, and that's the aluminum. All of the aluminum is right here at this train station, and I needed to get out there. So currently, I had the polymer resin leaving this train station, going to the swamp, then to the grassy fields, and then over here. And I was okay with it because I wanted to grab more of the polymer resin that was at this train station. So it really didn't bother me that this bit was going farther away and coming back, and it was kind of a complicated route. However, I need 1800 aluminum. So this is going to take a few freight cars, especially because these only stack to 100, whereas polymer resin stacks at 200. So you just have so much more time to transfer stacks of 200 than you do 100. About twice as much time. Fancy that. So let's head up to the Red Forest and let's see what we can do there. The good old Red Forest factory. Like the first really big singular factory I made in this save. And it's still working like a charm. Weirdly enough, I really didn't have any issues with the Mark 6 belts with the aluminum ingots. I had more issues with the rubber for some reason. But this is working like a charm. So we've got our bottom floor of the train station. Nothing is going to change here. Take a look upstairs though. There's the train bringing in bauxite from the other side. Let's make sure. Yep, none of these are full. Almost all the exact same amount. Perfect. Alright, so here is the first floor. This is the one that I've been using so far, and this was basically the only floor. And then I went ahead and added this floor. This is one of the first times I'm not going to use my huge train track blueprint, and I'm just going to do a singular train. Because here's my thinking. I need aluminum ingots here. And this is the only aluminum I'm going to need for this factory. I'm not going to build anything else that needs it, and nothing from here needs to come back here. So I really don't need to build a whole bunch of extra tracks that I don't need, so I'm just going to have one train go there, and just like all the rest, it's just going to be a push-pull. So as far as transporting things, I still really want to make a video on kind of the more advanced part of the logistics of trains with this stuff included. Just haven't quite figured out how I want to do it. But just for a quick example, each freight car has 32 slots. I'm going to be transporting aluminum ingots, so those stack in amounts of 100. So 3,200. Now, you can do this one of two ways. If I know the round trip, I can just divide by that, right? If I know this train goes there and back in 6 minutes, the most I can transfer is 533 and a third. Now, if you're curious about, well, I want to transfer 600 per freight car. Well, now you know that it needs to be able to do a round trip in 5 and a third, 5 minutes, 20 seconds. And that's including the docking and undocking. The easiest way to time your round trip is just to go from like train honk to train honk, is what I do. Right when it finishes the docking animation, it'll honk right when it's leaving. I just use the stopwatch on my phone, and you know, when I hear the first honk, I'll do it. I'll just sit on the train, and when it comes back and completes the full round trip and I get that honk again, then I turn it off. And that's how I calculate my round trip. I wish that, you know, it would give you metrics on the train station like it does with the drones for their round trip, but unless you're doing a push-pull, there's going to be some variability, so I kind of understand. But the whole point of that really was to show that from going from here to here, even though I can't time it quite yet, I can guarantee you is going to take longer than 5 minutes, 20 seconds. So 600 per freight car, probably still too much. So the easiest thing to do is just split that in half. So I'm going to do 300 on each freight car. Now I have 10 minutes and 40 seconds to do a complete round trip and to be able to keep the throughput that I'm looking for. And I think we should be okay. I already started the train track here. And I think what I want to do is, it's going to still be probably higher than this one, but I didn't want it to be at this level because eventually I've got to get close to sea level. But I definitely don't want to have to go up and down too much. So I'm going to run this track probably just on the outside of the existing one that's going all the way to the other side of the Red Forest. And then from there, I'm just going to drop it down. See how exactly I want to do it. But thankfully with blueprints, this is really pretty easy. You just click one and then the other. And then I can connect my tracks and keep my good old hover pack going. So if you're ever wondering about doing ramps, because if I were to do this, if I lock it in place, that's not great, right? That sits really high. So with ramps, the way I like to do it is I either go to the half mark or the full foundation mark. Usually I go to the half mark here, and then that means you'll go to the full foundation mark here because you need to go at least 1.5 foundation. And that right there will give you a pretty clean merging of going from flat to the ramp. And then that's how I do it on both sides. And then once I have that done, then I can connect the two. Gotta do some demolition on my way out here. Even though the quickest way to get from here to the coast would be going in close to a straight line, but that would take me right over that huge open gap, and then I would just have supports that were just hundreds of meters tall, and I just don't want to do that. So we're going to stick closer to the ground, but we'll still be a little bit above it. And then once we reach the end, then we'll drop down. So let me get to work, and then we can take a quick little train ride. It's not completed quite yet, but let's take a tour of what we've done so far. Sure is a good thing these things can't go off the rails, huh? Well, I guess unless you crash them. But we're not going to do that in this playthrough. So I have made it to the end of the Red Forest. Now, gotta get down to there. It's actually not too bad. So in my opinion, I've got two good options. I mean, there's lots of options, but in my mind, I see two good ones. I can either do just a long ramp, more or less, down there, or I could come out a little bit farther and then I could spiral down and then go over to the train station. And honestly, I went back and forth about this for a long time. And no matter which one I pick, I'm probably going to regret it a little bit and wish I did the other one. So even though part of me says I should probably do a spiral because, I mean, they just look cool, let's be honest. And it just kind of keeps things nice and tight, and so I don't have just a huge long ramp going all the way down there. The only thing about it is it does add quite a bit of distance to the track. Even though it's nice and compact, the length of the track would be pretty long going a spiral all the way down or close to it. So I think I'm going to try a ramp first and see how I can make that work. If it looks just awful or I just can't quite get it to work, then I'm just going to go with the spiral. And if the track just is too long that way, I may have to make the train even longer. But hopefully the ramp will work out just fine and it doesn't look too awful. I'm going to cross my fingers. I'm sure I'll probably make a spiral somewhere else. So for those wondering, I really don't have a good way to do this, to be honest. I probably should make another blueprint that's longer so that I have to make less of these. That would probably be the smart thing to do. As you can probably guess, I'm not going to do the smart thing. And I'm just going to use my existing ones that are only 4 foundations long. So yeah, as far as I know, using the wall is pretty much the best way to do it. I go down 3 walls and then I copy my blueprint, and this will give you what you need to look at. And then I can pretty easily line up the railing or the foundations, snap that in place. Let's get rid of some of these walls. And now I can extend my rail so that I can keep using my hover pack. And then I'm just going to keep doing this all the way down. And then once I get it all the way down, then I'll figure out the supports. Well, time to get back to work. It could probably look better, but I don't think it looks that bad. So I don't really mind the fact that it's kind of a really long ramp. I generally try to avoid doing stuff like that, just because you just end up with just such huge long supports, and I like trying to keep it reasonably close to the ground. And like I said, there'll always be a part of me that wishes that I just did the spiral instead, but this one actually came out alright, and I think the reason why is I couldn't go all the way in one go. I basically came to this point, had to make the turn, and then continue dropping down, and that would bring me to the level that I needed. And thankfully I didn't have to go all the way down to the seafloor, or else that would have taken quite a bit more track to be able to drop down that far. And now this train station has a second floor. This is how I'm going to bring the 1800 aluminum ingots from the Red Forest over here to the West Coast. Make all of those fused modular frames. Got my little ladder corridor here to get all the way down. Alright, so we're going to add some more sinks down here. Probably just slam these just right behind here. And I'll have the aluminum ingots probably right here. And then I'm going to need, obviously, to set up the train to bring in the iron ore. And I'll have that sinking down here. And I like getting this sort of stuff done early in the playthrough. That way I've got plenty of time to check out the throughput and make any changes instead of having to do that all at the very end when for some reason it's not working, and then you gotta let your trains run for like a half an hour to make sure everything's right. And if you're dealing with trains for logistics, I suggest doing it early. So then the buses will just continue along here in this little corridor. And then we'll just come to the logistics area of the factory, and we're going to start making it even more busy. Although it's going to spread out more that way, so no one area will be too crazy, I don't think. I was taking a look at my rubber, and this isn't exactly what I like to see. Yeah, see, that is kind of a problem. Now, you may not think so, because it's pretty little, and it's been running for a few hours now. But the issue is, there's a couple of them. See, this is fine. This is going to get rid of all of its rubber right as it finishes, and then it'll get some more. It'll be great. This one, however, never completely empties, and every once in a while it probably gains one, right? So eventually, many, many hours later, these two are going to back up. And then they're going to start intermittently shutting off. Not the end of the world, but it also means that I can't rely on having an actual 1200 on here, because somewhere it's just not doing its job right and not all of it's getting through. Still can't quite figure out why exactly it does it. but I have some ideas on how I can work around this. Ooh, okay, so about an hour and a half later of tinkering with this, I think I've come up with a solution that is a tad bit more reliable. And, surprise, surprise, I went with load balancing. So for the ones where I had 20 refineries in a row that I was going to group together, and not where it's like 8 and then 12 in the next row and then I group it together somewhere, these ones I did this way. So did them as pairs, right? And then when I got them to the pairs, so this is a 120 line, right? This is Mark II. Each machine is outputting 60. I did 5 of these together. So this one merges into this one, and then these two merge into this one, and then I have the mirror setup. That one merges to this one, and this is 240 on a 270 line. So 240, 240, 120. Here's my 600 on a Mark V, so we've still got plenty of room on here. And then that merges up with the mirror setup on this side, and now I've got my full 1200. And I think merging 2 belts of 600 together, for whatever reason, just much more reliable, and haven't really seen any issues with these ones. These ones all seem to be able to get rid of the amount, and it's just working great. Nice and smooth. Seems like a really reliable 1200 belt now. So for the other ones, because I had the first 20 grouped up, these rows are of 32 refineries, so the next 12 got grouped up, and this belt. So instead of using a merger, because they're 2 different amounts, it's not 600 and 600 like I am with this whole thing, I went with a storage container. So the irony of me saying that these don't quite act like mergers and splitters is they do kind of work like a merger, actually. The amount going in is the amount equal to leaving, so as long as whenever I check this, it either says 399 or 398, probably be the 2 numbers that I get, or 400, you know, sure. Any number right around those 3, and I'll be fine, right? It seems to be staying really consistent this way, and much more consistent than using an actual merger. Which kind of makes sense. A merger has a buffer of, you know, like 2 or 3 rubber, where now I have a buffer of 2 full stacks. Obviously, an industrial storage container is way overkill if all I need is a buffer of 2 stacks of the material to get this to work. But I needed the 2 inputs. So that's my workaround. If I have the ability to merge them all in one go, just doing the load balance method, I think is fantastic, and I don't see any issues. But if I'm merging 2 different amounts, like that's 12 machines, so that's 720 rubber on this one, and 8 machines, so that is a full 480 belt on this one, they just wouldn't necessarily merge together real nicely onto a Mark 6 belt. So using the storage container seems to have kind of leveled things out. And now I've been seeing really consistent belts and haven't really seen any gaps in a while. And most importantly, the machines seem to all be emptying at a consistent rate, and none of them are backing up like they were before. That makes me happy. Well, now it's time to actually get back to what I was doing. What was I doing? Oh yeah, trains. Let's do that. Let me get these trains running for both the aluminum and the iron so that I can test the throughput. And I have aluminum ingots. Take a look down here. Alright, so we've got everything coming in, and I've got it nice and load balanced right out of the train station. So first things first, we go straight into the industrial storage container. Since each freight car is only carrying 300 per minute, using a Mark V is more than enough to get it into the storage container. And then from here, we've got the Mark IV, and then a Mark II and a Mark I. So that would be 180 being sent back into the storage container, leaving me with the 300 that I want. So group up 2 300s, and then I've got a 600 belt. So I could do a 1200 and a 600, but I like the way that 3 600 belts look better. And then those are just coming right down here and into those sinks. And then I'm doing the same thing with the iron, although with this one it's a little bit different. Because I'm transferring 1120, I actually tried it instead of doing the smart thing and timing the round trip, because I had done it once and I just remembered it being short, and I was like, we'll just try it. Hey, it didn't work. because 3200 divided by 1120 a minute, you need to complete your round trip in under 3 minutes, and it was like 3.5 minutes, I think, for the round trip. So that wasn't going to work. But if I split that into 2 freight cars for each one, if I do that correctly, there we go. Now I have over 5.5 minutes, which was plenty of time. And so each freight platform is carrying 560. So I could have load balanced each one to do the 560, or what I decided to do right here was just have it go Mark 5 into a merger, meaning it's only going to be able to transfer 600. So I'll get 1200 going into here, and we've got 1200 coming out of here. And then I did have to bring them a little bit closer than I wanted, but we've got a Mark II belt down there. So that leaves me 1080 on this belt right here. And if I split the 120 3 ways, that's 40, 40, and 40. So here's my 1120 that I need. And then I just group up those two 40s and send the 80 back into the storage container. And then I'm just doing that for all 3 of these. And once I got the trains running, I decided to run over here and get my nitrogen bus going. So real simple, just like I've done plenty of times, but let me show you. It's funny when you have something on grid right around something that's totally off grid. They definitely look different. And so I've just got a really simple little outpost here. I may come back and do a little bit more decorating because this is pretty plain, but it's getting the job done. So I'm just grabbing all of the nitrogen with this well completely overclocked. I've got 2100. So I guess I'm not actually grabbing all of it. There's probably, yes, here we go. There's one node of 300 that I'm not using, mainly because I actually only need 2 of these pipes, but I figured I might as well take the 3rd one over there just in case. I can always just come back through, delete it if I don't need it, and send it somewhere else. Or if it's easier to throw on a train, now it'll be real close to that train station. So this was pretty simple, just needed to get this into the factory. So now I think I have most of the materials that I needed to gather finally here. Now I can start building machines. I think now is a good time to briefly go through the flowchart of what's going on today. I apologize, I'm sure this looks just way too busy on screen, and if you want to follow along, drag all the boxes where you want to drag them. There's a link to this pinned in the comments. But if we break this down into smaller pieces, I promise it's not too bad. I'm going to be using the steeled frame alternate recipe because that allows me to just use steel pipes and reinforced iron plates, which is fantastic. I'm also using the adhered iron plate because, well, I just made a whole bunch of rubber and I only need 140 of it combined with 420 iron plates to make that 140 reinforced iron plates. It's a great recipe and no screws or wire needed. And I only need 135 crude oil to make the 360 fuel I'll need for the heat fused frame alternate recipe for the fused modular frames. So as far as the flowchart goes, there's one difference to what I'm actually doing as to what I have planned here. I'm going to be making just extra iron ingots and a little bit extra concrete. Just because it's easy to just use the entire 1200 of a limestone node, and I can make it in 20 machines instead of the 18, and I'll just have some extra concrete laying around. Never really a bad thing. When making in bulk, I find it just easier just to more or less round up and make a convenient amount, and then I'll do the load balancing afterwards. Because I don't really want to deal with 6059.85 iron ore. Let's round up and make some extra. Now let me go through the blueprints I'll be using. First up, my 12 constructor blueprint. Oh, I'm really loving the Mark III blueprinter. Being able to fit 6 constructors side by side is really nice, and then you can easily stack them on top of each other. And then, especially with this recipe, using the steel pipes at 100%. If I've got 12 of them, that means I plug in a 1200 line of iron ingots, and since it's a 4 ingots to 1 steel pipe ratio, right here will output 300 steel pipes. And seeing that I need over 2600 steel pipes, I think this is going to come in handy. For my iron plates, I'm going to do it just a little bit different. Even though I could squeeze on a couple more, I decided to just do sets of 5. So we've got 5 on top, and they're all load balanced. and then we've got the bottom 5, and these are obviously all load balanced. So you've got your initial splitter, and that'll split in half. So this half goes to the bottom 5, this half comes up to the top 5, and then you just do the normal 5-way split. And I did try to start adding some signs to some of these just to try to help indicate where things go. So inputs that way. For these, I already figured out that I want the outputs to be going to the left. So I basically just manifolded it and then just had these come down to these mergers. Ends up working out pretty well, and it kind of switches up the look a little bit. I needed at least 25.8 machines, and so I just decided to place 30 machines. That way, since this is 10 of them, I can just place 3 of these next to each other, and it's nice and easy. So these are just underclocked ever so slightly. So for the next couple recipes, I need assemblers, and honestly, this was super easy because the multiples that I'm working with were pretty much all in 5s. So I'm basically just using the same 2, actually, assembler blueprints, because these are basically just mirrored, so that the inputs, which are actually on the second floor, so actually I should put this on this side, make a little bit more sense. Okay. So when they're next to each other, this stack of mergers and this stack of mergers are pretty close to each other. So I'll be able to just grab a splitter and I can join 2 sets of these blueprints together really easily. And then all of a sudden I have 10 together load balanced. So for the reinforced iron plates, these ones I'm going to underclock because I need 37 1/3 machines. So I'm just going to round up to 40. That's just a much easier number to work with, which gives me a nice even number of 3.5 for the output. Those reinforced iron plates are then going to get all used in this next step, which is using the steeled frame alternate recipe. So reinforced iron plates, a bunch of those steel pipes that I'm making, and there we go. And the last one to be using this same layout is the encased industrial pipes. The encased industrial beams using the encased industrial pipe alternate recipe. And I need 50 assemblers total, so this is really easy. With this and then the mirrored pair that I have, I'll just need 5 sets of those. Alright, moving on to the big boys. So manufacturers. This is a real simple 4 manufacturer blueprint using the heavy encased frame alternate recipe, and these ones are just underclocked to 2.5 per machine, because that is a whole lot easier than working with whatever that default number is. So pretty simple. The top 2 are paired up together, and then those come down. The bottom 2 are paired together, and then you've just got one more set of splitters. And the inputs are all on the inside, so that when I place down the mirrored counterpart, I can then do the same thing I did with the assemblers. I'll put a stack of splitters right in between the 2, and I can join 2 of these blueprints really easily. For the last step, we need a couple pieces, and one of them is nitric acid. So I've got this pair of blender blueprint. So we'll need nitrogen gas, water, and then some of those iron plates that I'm making. And I just have these underclocked, so I'm actually going to use a couple more machines than I would need. I actually only need 10 blenders at a minimum without overclocking. But I decided to have these underclocked so that they match the exact input required for the next set of blenders, which would be using this blueprint. So I took the bottom fluid input out, and those other blenders are going to basically be in a row right in front of these. And so that way, thankfully, the output is on this side, and so was that pipe that I was using. So thankfully, these all line up just super conveniently, and I'll be able to just plug the nitric acid straight into these ones. So I showed off the heavy modular frame blueprint. We're bringing in those by train, so these just go straight to the final step. Got the nitric acid. Now it's just fuel is the only blueprint that I haven't showed. And I'm just using a real similar setup that I've used in the past. So I've got the refineries right here. They'll intake the crude oil and turn it into the heavy oil residue, and also get some bonus polymer resin. I have these overclocked so that I can match these with this, and these are underclocked to only output 90. Because I only need 360, so I just need 4 blenders. So basically 2 of these blueprints will create all the fuel that I need for the fused modular frames. And then I've got my setup for the polymer resin, and I'll probably just sink those below. And I've got the input for the water, since each one of these will need 180. Each blueprint will need 180. All of this concrete is way too empty. Let's fill it up with machines. Alright, well, where to start? I'm thinking that this is just a huge area, and this is kind of an awkward, like, it's still a big area, but not huge. So I'm thinking I can probably fit all of the constructors in kind of this area. So let's try that. So I'm going to start with my iron pipe because this is the one that I need the absolute most of. Just get rid of that. Not quite sure how much space I need because I need a few of these. So let's try right about there. Decent amount of space there. And these overhang by just a little bit, not quite 3 foundations. They're ever so slightly more. I'm just going to line the output edge with that foundation. We'll just give each of them that just under 2 foundations of space in between them. I was wondering how this was off. It drifted off one. Okay, let's try that again. But I'm actually going to need to double these up because I need so many. And I think I might need to, yeah, I'm going to need to rearrange these. That is not really going to fit there. Alright, so I'm going to have to probably reposition these ever so slightly, but that's basically the idea with the iron pipes. I need 8 groups of the 12 constructor blueprint, and that takes care of most of it. But then the last 880 iron ingots, I'm going to load balance across 9 machines. So for those, I'm just going to take my 3 constructor blueprint and I'm just going to set 3 of them next to each other. Something like that. And that will basically be all of the iron pipes I need. The next set for the constructors would be the iron plates. And with this one, I'm going to need 3 blueprints since each one of them has 10 and I need 30 total. These are already underclocked. Alright, so that's what I need. However, I obviously don't quite like where they're placed. And voila! Now they're in the spots that I'm happy with. So originally I wanted to try to take up this whole space and just make better use of it, but they weren't going to all fit, and I'd just much rather have them in neat orderly rows. So my idea is this is actually going to be a wall. I'm going to separate the rubber part of the factory from everything else. So hopefully this will be able to get tied together a little bit easier in the future. So for now, this is everything that I need for all of the steel pipes. So now I just want to get these even together so the platforms are nice and even, and we'll line these constructors up with those ones. And I just need 3 of these, and that'll take care of all the iron plates. Beautiful. So that is all of the constructors in place. Let's go ahead and do some refineries. I need a total of 20 refineries for all of the limestone and the wet concrete, so I'm pretty sure I can just fit those all in one nice row here. And then the few dozen refineries I'm going to need for iron will go in this area. Let's start with limestone. So I think I want to give myself a lot of space because, well, it's going to be a lot of belts. And because these have an underfloor part to it, it's easiest just to add a second foundation so I can get something to snap it to. I forgot to show these off, but I'm using my 5 refinery blueprint. I think I have a whole video dedicated to these. And then I just already changed the recipe for the wet concrete. The naming is awful, but it makes sense enough. So I've got my AB2. Alright, so we do the single one, and then we do B. Right? Yeah. Alright, so that's 5. And then I grab my A piece, which is just a mirrored version of this, and the mergers. Can I ping? Oh, I can ping while I do this. Oh, that's awesome. Right there are where it's all going to get input. So if I stack up splitters right here, it's really easy to join the 2 5s. So we have A1. Then we go back to AB2. And I just need one last single one. And there we go. Wait, line up right. Ah, because they didn't. Okay. Yep. Forgot one. B, A, the single. We need to do another single. And then it's B, A, and AB2. There we go. I knew it should end right on the foundation line. Alright, so there are 20 refineries. Since each machine intakes 120 limestone, that means a set of 10 will take care of one Mark 6 belt. And then also each set of 10 will output 800 concrete. Nice and easy. Alright, so let's do the iron ingots. So instead of doing the same thing where it's in a row going this way, because these are going to be a bit longer, this is only 20 refineries, whereas these rows are going to need to be 32 refineries each. So instead, I think I'm going to do the rows going this way, and hopefully we can keep it in about the same amount of area. It'll just be really long going that way. Alright, so same thing, just going to lay down a few temporary ones. Actually delete these ones. Alright, so I've already got my mergers set up in the correct direction. We're going to have all of the inputs on this side, all the outputs on this side. And yeah, the beauty of doing 32 refineries at once is I just get to use a 4. And I don't have to mess around with the multiple blueprints to do 5 in a row, which is convenient. So I just need 8 of these in a row. Alright, so that is 1 row, so that takes care of 1 of my Mark 6 belts, and I've got 6 of them. So I just need to copy this 5 more times. Oh, it's beautiful, isn't it? 192 refineries. Not too shabby. Alright, before I fill up all the rest of the space with machines, let's do just a little bit of the pipe and belt work here, just so it's not hours worth of it later. For these right here, we've got 2 inputs. For the iron, I know that 1 whole row is going to deal with 1 Mark 6 pipe, so I'm going to belt all of these together. As far as the water goes, I can't put this all on 1 pipe. Each one needs 20, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to group up 8 machines. So basically, every 2 blueprints I'll group together. 8 machines means I need 160 water, so I'll just overclock 1 water extractor for every 2 blueprints, basically. And the way I like to do that is I just take the very end one, get rid of this junction because it's not needed. And then just replace that there. And then the middle 2 are going to get joined together. And then this one gets chopped off. Well, let's try that again. There we go. And as far as the belt work goes, I am going to connect all of these to power because this is going to be so much easier with my hover pack than doing this with a jetpack. So give me 1 second and then I'll show you how I combine all 32 refineries. Ah, much better. Alright, so now let me show you. It's pretty easy because we're dealing with powers of 2. It's just really convenient. So what you want to do is line up the splitter with the rest of the splitters, and let's see. Try to get it in between the 2 lifts. That means it's going to be pretty much centered, and then we'll just go up to, yep, that level there. So what I really should have done is just add this lift to all of these. Definitely an oversight on my part, but well, they're all placed now, so I'm not going to delete them just to get this lift in. Alright, so if I've got 2 Mark II belts, that means that this is going to be a Mark III lift on these ones. And then I can just delete those splitters. We can take our Mark III, and I need 1 more. Wrong height. There we go. Alright, and we just bring our Mark III into there. Got to add the lift. And there we go. So now 8 of them are connected. And we're just going to keep doing that. So, see, this is 8 machines. Oh, we'll just make sure we get the right one. 8 times 35, 280. So, Mark 4 on this one. And then we'll do the same thing here. Alright, now that those are all in place, Let's grab our splitter, go with 4, delete those 3. Now it's a Mark IV. And now I can join these two. This one goes up to 5. Now I grab the Mark IV. And this right here is half of all of the refineries. So we only need to do this one more time. And if it's half, that means I know this is just under 600. All right, so now I just need to do this whole thing to this half. All right, now I just need to connect the two halves. And this is far enough that it's not going to reach the whole way. So how far can we go? About here looks convenient. So let's just squeeze this in just right past the splitter. Go to Zoop and bring it up to there. Connect that there. And this should be the center of everything. Yep, that's the right height. Perfect. Let's do the same thing on this side. And there we go. We'll be able to put a floor hole right here because this, I already know this is the halfway mark, right? So this is going to be the end of one group of water pipes. So I didn't have to worry about that being a junction there. Same thing with that one. That'll be a curved edge. But now I can grab my Mark VI belt or lift. And there we go. There's all 32 refineries load balanced. I just need to do this a few more times. As far as the outputs go, my thinking originally was I would just try to keep this nice and compact. And I know at my home factory, I used a smart splitter to kind of like merge in the last bit, and it worked out fine. Now, because I make this whole factory and then I go back and record the video, I already know that this isn't going to work. I thought about including me testing it, but really it was just me horribly failing and putting those smart splitter in the wrong spot a whole bunch of times, and it was just a mess. I know there's a bunch of different ways I could probably do this. So the big issue comes down to basically just the output, right? So if I want 1200, but each of these machines are outputting 65, it's just not an easy to work with number. And because I'm dealing with so many, I really would like to deal with Mark VI belts, but what if I didn't? See, if I change this to using Mark V belts to do the initial grouping together, I can put them in nice convenient groups of 12 machines. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do 12 machines together. Basically, these first 3 blueprints, since I don't need this very last one. And we can just do Mark II into here. All right, so that will give me a full 780 belt, and that's the first 12 machines. And then I can do that for the second 12 machines. And then there's going to be 8 left over, which will give me a belt of 520. So for each of these rows, I'll have 2 full 780 belts and then 1 belt of 520. And that's how at least I'm going to get them out of the machines. And then this big spot right here, I'm just going to fill it up with load balancing. And that's how I'll recombine them and do any of those shenanigans to get full 1200 belts, because I wish it was as simple as just plugging them all in a manifold, but this recipe just makes things a little bit more complicated. That 7 to 13 it's just awful. As far as the load balancing goes from pretty much all the constructors, it's pretty much already done. And normally I would have to group these together some way, but these are already made so that each one just requires a Mark VI belt input and not much else you can do with that. So once I do all the rest of the load balancing, then I can kind of plug these up and finish doing that. But at least all of the rest of the load balancing is just included in the blueprint. I've already taken care of it. For the limestone, it's really easy. I already did it and I forgot, but I just needed to connect this belt since this is the kind of like standalone out of the group of 5. I just need to connect this belt and this pipe to each of those. So the 4 of them are pretty much all done. You just need to connect that 5th one. And because these need a good amount of water, I am just going to have them as separate pieces because, let's see, a group of 5 of them will require 500 water. Next step, before we get to the assemblers, I'm going to transform a little bit more down under here. I think I'm going to just cover most of these islands with concrete to give myself a little bit of space to work with for any of the belts that I need to do. I'm also going to have to throw a sink or 2 under here because, like I mentioned, I am making just a little bit more concrete than I need. Same thing with the iron ingots. Those I'm making actually a decent amount more than I need. And I also need water extractors for all this stuff. So I'm going to get to work laying all those out, and then I'll show you what that looks like. And I have a few more water extractors. I like to try to keep the pipe short where I can, so if it was possible, I just put the water extractor more or less right under the refineries that it's feeding. And then that way it goes just straight into the pump, and then just straight up into the machines. So nice and short. And like I mentioned, pretty much all of these are clocked to 160, except for the ones at the very end that are doing the limestone. These ones are all clocked to 250 so that I could just pair up 2 of them. I get my 500 pipe and it does the same sort of thing, except for these ones had to be a little bit farther away because all these refineries are just right above this land. But I was able to keep the pipes pretty short this way. Alright, well, I like to power on the water extractors early so that I can just pre-fill all of these pipes. So let's go ahead and connect all of these. Yellow lights everywhere. Did I forget to overclock any of them? Alright, excellent. So we'll get all of those pipes pre-filled, so that's not something we have to worry about. With Mark 6 belts, that ore gets here real fast. So I'd much rather have all of the water completely filled, and since the machines are already powered on, nice, these are getting filled up too. So at least that's something I just won't have to worry about later. Makes it a little bit easier in my opinion. Alright, so I've been doing a lot with the machines and belts and pipes and all that stuff, so I'm actually going to take a little bit of a break from that. I'm going to do a little bit of the aesthetics. It's kind of nice to break it up here and there. So I think it's about time I figured out how I put a wall in here and how exactly I want to split, this off from the rest of this factory. Well, I've been playing around with blueprints and I think I came up with one that I don't mind. So I think I'm going to use this for kind of like an inside wall. I really like using foundations where I can for walls. I really like the depth instead of just how skinny the normal walls are. Although sometimes just normal walls are just great. But when I have the chance, I like to use the full foundations. So since it's an inside wall, I figured I'd just put glass frame foundations on both sides and then line it with a beam and some modern railing. And then I just placed a 0.5 meter square sign every 2 foundations. So if it's on, basically you go 1 in and then 2, this is dead center of the blueprint. And then that way you can tile them and the lights will show up every 2. And I think it'll be a nice little pattern. And then just to kind of give it an extra little depth, I added some frame foundation walls just on the outside of just the half foundations. I used half foundations because I wanted to be able to color this part. So minor tangent. This is the one thing that I'm hoping that they add in the future. I love all of these buildables, everything in this category. I use quite a bit, to be honest. My only gripe is that you only get 1 color option, which for the most part is fine, and I would probably leave it that color 80% of the time. But when I'm using it as like an accent like this, man, it would be so cool if I could color these like Caterium or something like that and just kind of have them pop out a little bit more instead of them only being black. So I'm hoping in the future we have the ability to paint these things. I think a little change like that would add just a lot. And I mean, I hope we just get more buildables too. That would be nice. Alright, so I'm pretty much just going to outline this room with these walls. And I need to get rid of this. And good old blueprints makes this go by pretty quick. So I'm sure there'll be a little bit of touching up to do, especially wherever there's corners and whatnot. But yeah, I think I might actually move that in more. Don't actually need the extra space on this side. Might be nicer to have on this side. We'll see. I might play around with that a little bit. But the great thing is if you do need to move this all over by a foundation, it's so easy to just go one by one, just delete these, and then I can shift it over and replace them. And in just a minute or two, readjust it all pretty quickly. I love blueprints. So let me play around with this for a little bit. I need to find the spacing that I like. All right. So it's got walls. I separated the rubber room. And I've also been busy because I went ahead and placed the assemblers. The reason I cut that out is I made a whole bunch of mistakes, and one of them is still right here. Let me show you. I just kept going back and forth trying to get the spacing just right, so I would lay out the whole line and then I would need to delete it and then I would space things out right. And then I just confused myself because I've just got so many rows of almost identical looking ones. I should have just colored these things different. I like to color things, close to what they're making, and so many things end up being either black or silver or gray, unfortunately. So really, I need to start livening things up, and I just need to start using some blues and yellows and all sorts of fun colors. So the way I was thinking is we've got the adhered iron plate, so I've got my reinforced iron plate in this row. There's 40 machines in a row right here. The next one is my steeled frame. This one I needed 70 machines, and then when I realized that and I got placing them, 70 machines is like a really long row, and I didn't want to do that. And then I realized, oh yeah, this is going to be really awful to do the load balancing because I'm dealing with 35s, and yeah. So instead, I just placed 80 machines, and that is just a lot easier. So I just need to go through, and I didn't have these set beforehand, and I didn't think of it until after I placed them all, and really feel like deleting and replacing just for the recipe, so we're just going to change it now. I need 210 modular frames in total across 80 machines, and I just need to copy and paste. And that's both of these rows because each row has 40 in it. So far we've got 40 for the reinforced iron plates and then 40 and 40. So these are nice and the same. And so that's why this one ended up being in the back. But of course, originally I was thinking I would do this one first because it's just pipes and concrete. So it would be easier to get out of the way. Yeah, I changed this area around a lot. And thankfully, this recipe didn't need to change. It's just 10 of these blueprints, or 5 sets of the 2 blueprints, really. And that's all 50 there. So since it's the longest one, I decided to put this on the farthest side over. Now, to where I made the mistake, and that would be this right here. Originally, I was thinking I was going to lay them out this way, and that's what I did. And then I just forgot about these ones. Yeah, I really can't explain it. I laid these down, and then I started doing the other machines, and then I decided I want to rearrange these and do them, 90 degrees at a different angle going this way instead. And then I just forgot that I had already laid down a whole row here. So these are completely redundant, and I don't need these at all. And now I have a bunch of crates to clean up. Goody. So now I have this huge empty space that I don't really have anything to do with. And of course I could just delete them all and shift them over again. But you know what? I actually don't mind the empty space, and I think we're just gonna incorporate that into the build. I was already planning on leaving this space basically more or less open. I didn't need to cram everything so close together. I thought it'd be nice to have a bigger hallway that kind of went down the center of the factory. And I don't know, it would give me a spot to work on doing some more aesthetics, maybe put in some cool lighting or whatever other architectural pieces I could design in the Blueprint Designer. So having one more piece like this, I don't think is that bad. And even though it is a fairly large amount of space, 12 foundations, it's in the grand scheme of how big this factory is, it's really not that much space. So I'm just gonna leave it. I'll figure out something. But that is pretty much all of the assemblers done now. So that leaves me with this area back here. And this is more than enough space, but I've got a couple things left to do. I've got the heavy modular frames to make. So we'll be combining, it's mainly stuff from right here, and then some more pipes and then concrete. So I'm thinking this area right here would be good for the heavy modular frames. And then for everything else, I'll need a small amount of space for the fuel. So I'm thinking do that probably at the very end because that's also closest to the resource well. So just shortens the pipe for the oil, and I'm all about that. And then in the spot in between, I'll basically do a row of blenders for the nitric acid, and then the last row of blenders to make the fused modular frames. We're so close. All right, so we'll start, somewhere right over here, I think. Put it in blueprint mode and make this nice and easy. So since I needed 21 1/3, and I did the underclocking so that I can just use 24 machines because that is just so much easier. And I just can alternate between my two blueprints so that each pair is facing each other. And that's all 24 manufacturers. All right, so let me show you where the rest of the machines are going to go, and then we'll come back and we'll do that fun belt work. All right, so here at the end, we're going to do the fuel. All right, let's get that. Ooh. Nudge it into the right spot. Perfect. All right, that looks good. And there's the second one. And the next part, I have more underfloor logistics going on. And it's not much for these blenders. I just thought that it would be nice and clean looking because I did it with so many of the other builds where I just run the power underneath instead of having my typical like beam or the pillars or anything running across to do the power. So I just ran the power straight down. So since those power connections are already in there, just have the floor included. You can definitely do this same sort of blueprint and then just don't include the floor, but have the wall connectors like they're there. Basically, you just delete it and then save it like that. And then as long as they were 1 meter on top, once you get the first one in place, that way you don't have to delete all the floors necessarily. But I don't mind, especially because I kind of wanted to make them a different material anyways. And there's 12 blenders to do the nitric acid. So I think I'm going to give myself just plenty of room. And now the final machines. Blenders for the fused modular frames. Lock this in place. Looks good. Go back to blueprint mode. And that's it. That's all the machines I need. I think. Oh, I might actually need 1 or 2 more water extractors for these, but minor detail. So this right here, so I can finally explain why I did this, is why the blueprints are set up like that. Is now I can just take this and it'll just go a nice straight connection from one machine to the next. Make sure we color these white since it's nitric acid. And it just makes it nice and simple. I've never had any sort of fluid issues when I do pipes like this. Now it's everybody's favorite part of the factory, belt and pipe work time. And before I get to that just super fun belt work, I decided to add a second wall. I knew I wanted to separate this kind of corridor. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with it, but last thing I wanted to do was run a whole bunch of belts down like this foundation and then realize this would be the perfect spot for a wall and then have to move everything over. So I knew I was going to put something here, so might as well get that there so I can work around it. And once I kind of got all of the machines in place, I realized there's going to be a number of things that have to come all the way from that end all the way back here, like steel pipes, and there's some concrete. I need some iron plates for the nitric acid. So I figured this would be a pretty decent like corridor to just run all of that stuff down. And then I've got a walkway on either side so I can see everything moving around. And I like that. And so now when I need to branch off some of the things, I can kind of work around this already being here. And it'll just kind of save me some time and effort in the future. So with the bell work on a project like this, it's really easy to have it be feeling really overwhelming. Like there is a lot of belt work to do, even though I've already done a lot of it within the blueprints themselves. There's still a bunch to do. And really you could start anywhere, but in my opinion, there's two good spots. Either you kind of start at the end and work your way forward, or start at the beginning and just go logically back this way. Now, I like to go from the beginning just because of the way that I do belts in my factories. For example, with machines like manufacturers, since they have 4 inputs, I like to have the slowest belt on top and the fastest belt on the bottom. Why? I don't really know. Really, it's just easier to see things on slower belts, and those will be nice and close to me on the walkway. I think that's really all there is to it. So it's easier if I do all of the ones in the beginning, because these tend to be the ones with the fastest belts. And then as the parts get more complicated, I usually need slower and slower belts. So let's start with the iron. So this was one of the more interesting bits of load balancing I've done, and I'm pretty proud of it. It works great, and that's kind of the name of the game. Now, even though I only needed 6 versions of these, I just thought it was easier just to make a quick blueprint. So I'll probably never use it again, so it's just the pure iron ingot load balancer. And this is what I came up with. So even though I only need 6 of them, since there's 6 rows of refineries, I thought it was just easier just to blueprint it. And it's just, I don't know, I love blueprints. And I try to add labels, just try to make my life as easy as possible, especially when you come back here in a couple months. It's just kind of confusing when you just see, well, there's 6 inputs, but I'm only using 3 of them back here. And yeah, so this is the way it's going to work. So for each of these rows, I have 2 780 belts and I have a 520. So 780 gets plugged into there, 780 gets plugged into there, 520 goes into there. All right, so this is just a regular splitter, and then I've got a Mark II lift up here, and then a Mark I lift here. And then for whatever reason, I did it the opposite here. It really doesn't make a difference. As long as one's a Mark II and one's a Mark I, that's gonna take, 120, 180 between these two out of the 780, leaving me with 600. So that's the way this should work, is this should have 600, this should have 600, giving me a 1200 line. And then we're combining everything else right up here. So that would have been 180 split off on both of those halves, right? And then we're going to add that 520 line. And then if we add in the 1200, it all adds up. So 2080 is what each of these rows are creating. And it just works out great. So this is a nice, just real simple load balancer that I made just specifically for this situation. But now I can basically just place these right here on the edge of each one. And that's going to condense these, and I'll get 6. Is that in the right spot? Ah, it's off. I knew it. Okay, great. So now, when I plug these up, so we just go to straight mode. Man, I love that mode. And then I can place old stubby, or I can just make one manually if I want to. And now we're all connected. So this will give me 6 1200 lines, nice and load balanced. So for each one of these, I'll be able to connect one of these blueprints. But unfortunately, I need more than that, so I'm going to have to do a little bit more load balancing as well. So that'll give me 6 of these, right? But unfortunately, that's not quite enough. I need 8. It's probably not where it's going to go, but... So luckily for me, one of the amounts that I need is actually 880. So I can just plop down old stubby here and make sure that we change it to Mark 6. let's see. So 880 is the amount that I need for these 9 constructors right here that are doing the odd amount of steel pipes. I haven't set the recipe, so let's go ahead and do that. So I could do the math real quick, or I could let this do the math for me. So I don't know exactly how many steel pipes, I just know how many steel ingots that I... Whoops, no, this is wrong. There we go. Helps if we pick the right recipe. So I don't actually know the amount that these are going to output, but I do know the amount that they're going to input. So I need 880, and we're going to use 9 machines. And let's divide that by the default of 100 iron ingots per minute. Although, funny enough, we're now going to multiply it by 100 to get the percentage, so I guess you didn't really have to do that, huh? Anyways, this is how many we need for each one. So let's just go ahead and round up. So this is basically going to be 300. So this needs to be Mark 4, Mark 4. And here is our 880 that we're plugging into there. All right, so that's one thing of steel pipes done. Hooray! And since I know I'm going to need all of these 1200 belts, let's just go ahead and have these just run right along the edge. All right, so we've got the other 5 of them grouped up, and then we're just gonna connect these up basically. So like that one will go to there. And I think I'm going to redo all of the limestone, and I'm going to have those go the opposite direction. Because the 2 things that the concrete are needed for are the encased industrial beams, which are the row at the far end right there, and then the manufacturers. So I think having the concrete go along the outside is just going to make a little bit more sense. So I'm going to flip those all around and have them merge and go out that way. And I'll just have 2 800 belts, and then I can do the load balancing down there. Be a little bit easier. All right, so these take care of the next 4. So I've got 6 of them taken care of. I need 2 more 1200 belts to take care of the rest of the steel pipes. All right, so let's see. So if I've got 880 to deal with, what am I short? So I'm short 320 from making a full belt. All right, so I want to turn 2 more. So I want to turn this one and this one into 1200, and that means I need to add 320 into each of those. So let's work with this one. And you know, I think this is actually going to be pretty easy. So if I take a splitter and put this right here, and grab a conveyor pole so we can create old stubby, mark 6 lift and face it the right direction. All right, so I've got 880 going into here. So let's go ahead and put that there. Now I do have to remember, let's see, these, oh, that's not the right spot. It's gonna be, this goes there, this goes there. Ooh, that is, it's a little close, isn't it? Actually, we can just use the one on the side. I don't need 3 of the outputs. All right, so that goes there, and then we'll put this one here. All right, so 880, if I split that in half, that would be 440 and 440. So I'm gonna place a merger here. So if I've got 2 things of 440, if I subtract a Mark II belt, I've got the 320 I'm looking for. Now 440 is pretty close to being full, right? So there's a good chance you could probably just do this and you're probably fine. But because I'm paranoid that it's not going to work, I am actually just going to only do a smart section of Mark II, and then I'm going to do Mark III. And the only reason for this is every once in a while there's going to be a gap on these belts, and having a section of faster belt will make up for any of those gaps, whereas if you're only using the belt that you need, if that gap transfers over to here, you only have 119 instead of 120. Definitely not the end of the world, but if you're ever wondering why machines might not be at 100% and they're just constantly at 99 or 98, that could be why, until things just kind of get completely backed up in one direction, which could take a very long time. But now I've got my 320 line that I can just run right over both of these. So it's this one and this one. And this right here is extra. So I am going to send this 240 extra that I have. That's going to go downstairs and into a sink. All right, so for this merger, let's just go ahead and place it right there. 880 into here. And then we're just going to create a short lift right on top for that 320 that's coming in. Keep those, and now I think these should be in line. Ah, beautiful. Ah, we don't need that there. And then let's just go ahead and place this one here. Create short lift. Here it's Mark 6. And this one, Mark 4. And now we can connect those. And so now I've got all 8 of the Mark 6 belts that I need. Oh, guess that was in the wrong spot. Forgot about this one. Alright, there we go. So that's all the 1200 lines that we need. Now I just need to connect these with the right ones, but that's nice and easy. I mentioned the concrete. Let me show you how I'm going to do the load balancing for the concrete. Alright, so this is where those belts are going to plug into. I just kind of skipped that part, so since I have to redo all of those mergers. But this is where they're going to plug into. And then I need them to go to 2 places, right? They're going to come to about here and then get plugged into a splitter. Alright, and this is the back end of the assemblers, so I need some of them to plug into this front part, right? And that needs 1000 concrete, and each of these belts are going to have 800. So this is really easy. I just need a second splitter, and then we're going to grab a merger. That'll go there. Well, let's line it up first. There we go. So there goes a merger, and then we'll have another merger over here. So 800 gets split in half, so here's 400, here's 400. Then we're going to take this 800 belt, and that goes right into that merger. And then we're going to take this 400, and we're going to split this in half. So there's 200, and there's 200. So the 200 plus the 800 gives me the 1000 I need for this recipe, leaving me with 600 on this line. And to do the rest of the load balancing for the concrete, I need 440, and I've got a 600 line. This isn't necessarily the easiest to work with, so I'm going to use some smart splitters. So we'll just do it a little bit different. Let's just go ahead and place a splitter here. Do another splitter here. Alright, so the 600 is going to go into here. And then what I'm going to do is just put a merger right there. Alright, so I've got my 600 belt, and what I'm going to do is take a Mark II and a Mark IV. Because 480 and 120 is 600, so these should both be full at all times. Well, actually, I want this one to be a little bit farther forward. Okay, so Mark IV into that one. And then from here, okay, just had to push that one back a little bit. All right, so we got the Mark II, the Mark IV. With this one, we're going to do a Mark 1. So we've got 60 into here. And if I do all 3 outputs, that would give me 20 on each of those belts. So I've got 20, 20, and 20 to make up the 60. This still has to be Mark 4. This would be 120, 140, 160. 600 minus 160 is the 440 I am looking for. So this will go on and plug into the manufacturers for the heavy modular frames. All right, for all of the assembler madness, the load balancing is actually relatively easy. Because I've already done the 5-way split within the blueprint, now I just need to connect the blueprints. And by placing 2 splitters right here, I can really easily just connect 2 of them. So now 10 of them are all load balanced together. But what I do need to check is the speeds. So let's take a look. All right, so each group of 5 machines would need, what is that, like 52.5? Less than 60, definitely less than 60. All right, so I know that both of these belts can be Mark 1 for all of these. All right, so that leaves me with, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so load balancing these is going to be pretty easy. For this, I'm just going to drop this down to the bottom floor here. And since these should be aligned with this foundation, I can just put 2 of these like that. Let's see, and there's a couple ways you could do it. Either you could mess around with this, although it's going to be kind of weird, right? I think what I'll do is this one right here will go up to that spot. And then on the bottom one, you just have to place it 2 meters farther out so it won't connect with the machine. That's okay. Alright, so make sure we connect these. And then from here, I can just connect these to these splitters. And then this right here should be the center of this whole row. We'll place 2 of those. Now, since those were just under Mark 1 belts, that means that this is definitely going to need to be Mark 2. And there you go. Now I just need to do the same thing to the other half. And then I just need to plug in 420 iron plates and 140 rubber. And this is going to spit out 140 reinforced iron plates. Now the mergers are also set up just like the initial splitters, so that I can just place 1 more merger right in the middle, and I can combine the 2 blueprints really easily. So there is 10 all grouped together. So once I get all of these grouped together, I'll just do that in a similar fashion. That'll give me the 140 reinforced iron plates, and those are basically just going to come down this direction. We'll go all the way over here. And then into this madness, because right here is 80 assemblers that need to get load balanced. Alright, so first things first, let's go ahead and just place down a whole bunch of splitters in between the 2 to get those grouped together. Taking a look at the machines, I need very little reinforced iron plates. Only 8.75 steel pipes for each machine. And so each block of 5 of them definitely only need a Mark 1 going into it. So we can just do Mark 1 for all of these initial belts. Alright, so now I have them grouped up into, I think that should be 8 sets of 2 splitters. So this is where things are going to get a little bit different. I've never quite done this before, but I thought it would be interesting. So I'm going to combine these 2 right here. So the bottom one is going to have to be a Mark II, because that's the steel pipes. And if we take a look at these, 10 of them is going to be 87.5. So yeah, we need Mark II belts for that section right there. All right, so those 2 are going to be like that. And then with these 2, and with these 2, I am going to spin the splitter around in the opposite direction. So Mark 1 on top, Mark 2 on the bottom. Alright, and then in the midpoint of these 2 splitters, which should be right here. See, and with these, I need to have them facing a different direction. Let's see, we'll do this one facing that way, and then we're going to spin it around. Have that one facing this way. Alright, so the bottom one is going to have to be Mark III. Whereas the top one can still be Mark 1. Let me do the same thing to this half. Alright, so now we have 2 identical halves, but we can't group these together like that. That's not how this works. So the bottom merger is going to face this way. And, well, they're both facing the same way. See, the very center of this should be right here. Right on the middle? It is. Okay, so that one's going to go there, and then this one will go here. Terrific. Alright, so this one is the Mark III. Put that in there. Let's make sure we keep things consistent. Oh, we're going to spin these ones around then. Alright, so this one will get plugged into here. And the top one gets dragged down to here. Alright. And so that means, I guess I was a little off on that one. Alright, so here is the 140 reinforced iron plates. Just gonna have to run this just right along the seam. But thankfully, just enough room. Alright, and then the steel pipes will get plugged in on this side right here. And let's see, I think this was 440? Oh no, 700. What am I thinking? Mark V. Alright, so we just need to plug in 700 steel pipes there. And the reinforced iron plates will eventually work their way over to here. And this will create 210 modular frames. Nice. Alright. And because even though they're the same blueprint, the load balancing is different for each one of these setups. Now we're on to the encased industrial pipes. Thankfully, this is the one that I didn't need to change any of the clock speed with, so that's convenient at least. The downside is I needed 50 machines. So we're going to start with the same thing we did before and throw down the splitters in between the two mergers. And if we take a look at the numbers, oh yeah, okay, so 20, let's just work with 24 and we'll make them the same. So 24 times 5 is, hey, look at that, 120. So we need 2 belts into these. Now I have 5 sets of splitters that some are in the complete wrong direction. Caught it halfway through and then forgot to change the first one. Now I have 5 sets of splitters. So now we're basically just going to do good old 5-way split. So for this, I think it'd be easiest if I just bring these all down to the floor level. So we're going to do this one here, and then you could do it a lot of different ways. I'm just going to use a temporary foundation. There we go. Okay. And that's how I'll do that basically. So now I just need to do a 5-way split. And let's see. Just going to bring down the bottom one just to give myself a reference. Alright, so we start with 2 splitters right here because I want this to be nice and easy. Alright, there we go. So these need to all be Mark II, right? There we go. Alright, so this is going to be the splitter that deals with 3. The other splitter is going to be the one that deals with the 2 and the part that loops back. So let's just go ahead and get this out of the way. Alright, so now we've got the 2 kind of halves, right? So this is where things get a little bit different than the way I normally do a 5-way split. The way I've done all of these other ones, see, these are all just a super compact version, so it's a little bit harder to tell. So the part that, let's see. So as long as this initial amount that's getting plugged into the 5-way split isn't more than 1,000, this system, you may have to change a whole bunch of the belts around, right? But this system will work. Now, if that initial amount you're plugging in is more than 1,000, because you need to loop back what essentially is a 5th, because when you're looping it back, you're basically creating a 6th, 5th. There is a limit to that. Now, there is a way around it, and that's what we're going to use today. So normally I would have this splitter actually arranged in a different way, and this right here would go into a merger that would then feed into a splitter that split half of it going here and half of it going here. But we're going to do things just a little bit different this time. What I'm going to do is put a merger right here. And then also a set of mergers, I don't know, we'll say right here. And let's see, where is, I guess this is basically the halfway mark. All right, so if we place the initial splitter right here, I think this will all work out just great. All right, so we've got the initial two amounts, right? We've got two Mark 6 belts, so those are going to be coming in just like this. Old stubby. And there we go. All right, so we'll have 1,000 concrete on this one, 1,200 steel pipes on this one. And the 1,200 is the one that's the issue. All right, so if we immediately split this in half, that would be 600 going here and 500 from the top one. But really, we're just worried about that bottom one. All right, so 600 and 500. All right, and we can keep using Mark 5 for all of these. Those just go straight into the splitters. So this goes to there and into there. Terrific. Well, let me rearrange these ever so slightly. Okay, just had to move the mergers out a little bit. All right, so for this last piece, because we do need to use both of these inputs, what we do is we place a splitter right here. And just like the others, this is going to be a Mark II belt. Means this only needs to be a Mark I. And then we can take this belt. And there we go. Oh, had to work around that bit a little bit. Guess if I had a little bit more space, probably could have spaced it out so that everything was really neat, but close enough for me. So this right here is how you can get around that belt speed limitation. So I'm not capped at 1,000. I can do a full 1,200 belt doing this. You just have to move where the splitter is and add an extra merger. And then this will just work like a charm. All right, as far as other load balancing goes, the manufacturers are probably no surprise, really easy with the way that I set these up. So we just stack 4 of them. And let's check the belts. Okay, so the first two, when you group them in 4, that's still a Mark I belt. So we can use Mark I for both of these, but the other two are both going to need Mark II belts. And then to bring them all together, we'll just throw down another stack of 4. All right, for this, I'll just look at the final numbers that I'm dealing with. So the top thing is going to be modular frames. That's 160. So if we divide that 3 ways, that's still only Mark I. So how far do these go? They're stackable right here. All right, so Mark I for the top belt. Next one down is 200 encased industrial beams, so this one's going to need to be Mark II. All right, and same thing with the concrete. Only need 440, so this can be a Mark II. Wait, no, 3 of those is only 360. Nope, I'm silly. This needs to be a Mark III. And then the very bottom one is a Mark III. All right, and that will get, oh no, that's not the right spot. There we go. All right, that's all 24 manufacturers load balanced. All right, well, for the last bit, I'm honestly probably just gonna skip it. I think you guys probably get the picture. We've done a lot of belt work, and there's 12 machines here. So grouping these, in pairs, and then one group of 3. Same thing with all of those. So it's all pretty simple. The only difference with these ones here, we take a look at the recipe, the aluminum ingots, so each machine needs 150. So that means I need 300 going into there and 300 going into this one. So for these, I'm just going to group up into just the pairs of the blueprints. And I'm not going to load balance the entire thing because obviously all 1800 doesn't fit on one belt. So we'll just have 3 spots to plug in all of the ingots. Everything else will get kind of load balanced together. As far as the fuel goes, I could obviously put it all in one pipe because in total I need 360, so there really wouldn't be an issue. But just because it's already kind of separated, I think I'm just going to group up 2 blenders and 2 blenders, so each pipe will feed half of these ones. Alright, so let me get to work on doing just all of the rest of the belt work, because now most of the load balancing part is done. Now it's just dragging all the lines from, the steel pipes all the way over to here. And I'm sure there's actually probably a handful of other load balancing that I've forgotten about to show off. But I'll make sure to highlight those in the tour. So let me get to work. I got a lot of more belt and pipe work to do. And add a couple more walls, I think. Basically, all of the final touches. The only actual... Oh, actually, there's one last, real piece of work, but we're just going to include that in the tour as well. But let me show you. Alright, so there is the resource well. I need to throw the pressurizer on that. I'm going to get some pipes, and we're just going to go underneath, use that logistics floor, and we'll get the crude oil plugged into here. I only needed 135, so it's only 1 or 2 of the nodes out of all of them there. And I'm honestly probably just going to turn this on early and let all of the pipes back up with the fuel, because that's really just what I prefer to do with fluids, and I'd rather just have that done ahead of time. And I'm just going to sink the polymer resin because I'm making so little fuel right here. Alright, so let me get to work, and then we'll take that tour. Tour time. So let's start with the train station, because we're here. Go downstairs and see what we've done. A couple small changes I made down here. So the first major one is I added some priority power switches, and those are connected to the sinks. They're currently switched on, so that way when I turn them off, these smart splitters, which have overflow going to the left, any going to the center, which right now the center is going into the awesome sink. So right now they're prioritized to go to the sink. But as soon as the sinks get shut off, the overflow will kick in and they will head on into the factory. I wanted these on 2 different priority power switches because the iron is going to get used right away, whereas the aluminum is only used in the very end step. And because it's used in such a high volume, I'm not going to send this into the factory until I actually need it, or else it's just going to get backed up. So we're just going to let that sink for quite a while. And so here we have the smart splitter set up for these ones, basically the same thing. And then at the end, this is where all of the finished products are going to go. So I've got 50 modular frames, 24 heavy modular frames, and then 36 fused modular frames. And I already threw in the smart splitter so that way I can send them off to wherever I want. But then I can set it up so the overflow will send to the sink. And that way this factory won't shut off for some random reason because I forgot a train or something. Just keeps everything moving. Alright, let's go ahead and use my handy hypertube. And there are some more hypertubes now. So this one will take us downstairs, and we'll take that one next. But first, let's take this one. Alright, just spits us out just right here. Just really simple. I didn't want to do too much, so I just lifted this up like I normally do so that I can easily bring the pipes up from the resource well pressurizer satellite node thingies. Whatever they're called. Oh, just resource well extractors. Ah, well, that's just too easy. And then I've just got labels for my extra pipes. I could have just sent them into the factory, but for whatever reason, I just have them here. Maybe I'll throw them on a train. I don't know. But that's all of the extra oil that I've got. And that just goes right into the factory, and right back there is where that gets turned into fuel. So let's see what changes I've made downstairs. Ta-da! More hypertubes. I wasn't going to go crazy with decorating down here, but I did want things to be a little bit easier to get around. And I do have extra rubber that maybe I'll use in the future, so I thought it'd be useful if I actually had a way to quickly get over there instead of it just being kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And this brings us to the extra rubber, which we do need actually for this build, and I forgot to show this load balancing off. So for right now, we are just clipping through this lift. When I'm ready to get this party started, we're going to start it right here actually. We're going to delete this belt, and then we'll connect this lift to this lift so that it'll activate all of this load balancing, and then I'll switch it from, I'll delete this to this, and then this will get plugged in. We're basically just going to switch it over when I'm ready. So what this is going to do is we've got a smart splitter so that we can send the priority over here, but it'll get limited down to a Mark II. So here's 120, and we have the remaining going into this smart splitter. So same thing, priority over to this one, sends it into a Mark I. So we split it all three ways. There's 20, 20, and 20. So we've got 120 and the 20. Here's my 140 that I needed for the reinforced iron plates. And then we have the rest of that 40 just get grouped back up onto that line, and then we're back down into the sink. So we're going from, 660? 660, and then we'll be at 520. This 160 is, I believe, the extra concrete that I'm sending over. It's got a ways to travel because it's coming pretty far, but it felt weird to just place a sink down there for that. Whereas if I bring it over here, both the rubber and concrete I may have a use for in the future. So at least they're sinking in the same spot now. All right, so that's the rubber. And let's go back upstairs. So I think these ones are the aluminum ingots. These are the final products going that way. And this is the iron ore, which just drops down here. And then we head on over here. Just go along the ground because the ground is nice and easy. And then we use the ceiling to get it to the right spot. And I really love the stairs. I do really hope that we get a corner stair piece. Come on, Coffee Stain. It just makes sense. Alright, and then the iron and the aluminum just head on over to here. So the aluminum heads over to here and heads up there. I'll show that in a second. The iron zigzags over here and then splits off to each different row. Oh yeah. So here's one of those things, the load balancing, that I forgot to show off. The majority of iron plates that I'm making are going to the reinforced iron plates. However, I needed 96 for the nitric acid. So this is what I did to split that off. I used the split belt speed trick here so that I can make sure that this is a full 120 belt. And then from there, I just go into my 1/5 and 4/5 blueprint, because 4/5 of 120 is 96. And then that gets split off. So I wanted to do the load balancing here. It was just a little bit easier, and it made everything nice and even upstairs. Yeah, you'll see in a second. All right, so here's where we're sinking some more extras. I believe most of this is iron ingots. I think actually all of this is iron ingots. So I am making quite a bit more than I need, but can you really have too many iron ingots? I went back and forth on whether I was going to add more to this factory or if this was going to be it. Whether I should just close off this side, put a roof on it, and, spend the time to finish decorating it. But I really wasn't sure if I was going to add more onto here, and I really think that I probably will. So I don't want to have to delete huge sections just to add on more. So it's still kind of unfinished, but I'm okay with it. I'll be back here sooner than later. So if you remember before, I actually think I had this in like 2 sections, which were just kind of weirdly laid out, and I really wasn't sure how I was going to do the turns. And originally they were going to be, a much sharper turn because they would have stayed within just the normal like 45-degree angle from one of the corners. So that's where the curve would have been, and then there would have been like a flat section and then another curve. But I just wasn't crazy about it, so instead I just did one really long curve. And I really should have showed doing this while I was making it, but better late than never, right? So say I wanted to take a curve and I wanted to take it from the corner of this foundation to the corner of that far foundation that's sticking out there. Because that is a far distance, and I know my beam won't actually go that far. Or will it? So I'm going to click it right on the middle of this foundation, and we're going to go into freeform. And I'm going to fly all the way over there. All right, now that I'm here, now I want that to go at the exact same spot. So right in the middle of this foundation, right on the corner. So right here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this same spot. Now I'm going to go back. So I could probably look at the painted beam because that should be in the right spot, but just because I like to be safe, we're going to point it at the exact same spot that I placed it originally. So right there. All right. So the cool thing about beams is even if you are way outside the range, whatever you point at, it will still keep the correct angle. So now I can take a foundation, and if I snap it to the end of the beam, it is right directly in the middle, right? So all I need to do is go 4 meters this way, 4 meters this way, switch it to zoop, and well, place 1. And now I can zoop. And now, since we're pretty close, let's go over to this side, and we'll do the same thing. So if I snap it to the beam, hit H to lock it in place. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. And now if I zoop, now chances are you're still going to have to clip them together because there's just no way that that's going to be, that would be too perfect. But if you look, we can hit H. Oh, might as well just place it, right? They are perfectly aligned. So no weird seam. You do have to deal with the Z fighting or use a different material. What asphalt is great at is clipping into each other like that. And there you go. So if you ever want to create a, I guess like a diagonal, especially if it's just like a really custom spot and not your normal 5 or 45 degree angle, it is a good way to do it. Beams are amazing. And then because I've got this on the world grid, and this is very much not the world grid, I've got to figure out a way to merge the two. So the easiest way I could think of was just to put a huge thing of foundations and just let them kind of clip into it. Covers the gap really well, and yeah, I don't mind. Really need to figure out how to use more colors instead of just black, white, and asphalt. One day I'll discover the color wheel. Alright, so taking a look at the machines, I didn't change too much. I just added a few more beams, although I think I forgot to do that with the assemblers. But like I said, I'm not done with the factory. We'll be back here. Alright, so this is all of the concrete. I did add a walkway to try to connect everything. And I added quite a few more hypertubes within the factory. And this is what I decided to go with because I didn't want them to just run right in front of the windows because, well, they're windows. I wanted to be able to see. I actually think I'm probably going to get rid of these. I'm going to create some sort of door here because, yeah. But here is that hallway that I decided I was going to do something with. Maybe I should change these to a different color so it adds some more color instead of it just being the normal light. But this was the corridor for all of the belts to go down. Half of them branch off a little bit early to go into all of the assemblers. The rest of them are all going all the way to the end. Oh, and you get that cool like mirror reflection at the end. So you can't see through them anymore. That's kind of cool. So for most of these, they just run the length of the room that they're in. And that way it would make traveling around a little bit faster. So this was that row of the assemblers that I ended up deleting. I just ended up kind of leaving it as blank space. But like I said, I'm not done here. So maybe I'll figure out something to do. Oh, and in case you're wondering, of course, I made these a blueprint because I was going to place so many of them. It was just so much easier to especially get the angle right. So for whatever reason, when you go to place them down, it just always shows them as completely horizontal. But as soon as you place it, it'll go to the angle that you set it as in the blueprint designer. So I got the angle just right. And then that way I didn't have to worry about any of them being off. So really simple blueprint, but if you want to make sure it's consistent, blueprints are the way to go. All right, so if we come over to here, here is the assembler room. So the iron plates will be on this belt, rubber will be on this belt, and then I think both of these will be steel pipes. But yeah, pretty much all of the load balancing stayed the same for all of these. The only thing I did feel a little bit weird about having these splitters, floating so high off the ground, I decided to just add some small frame pillars, especially because they were just at the perfect height for them to fit in there, so why not? Alright, so for the modular frames, I'm making extra. They are used in a space elevator part, so that may be one of the reasons why I'm making extra. I am definitely making more than I need. But for things like this, it was easiest just to find the next best number above what I need, so that I can pick a convenient number that will give me all round even numbers to work with. So to split off 50, it was pretty easy. So I've got 210 on this belt, and then I'm just using a smart splitter so that I can prioritize this direction. So that's using a Mark II belt for this part, but then it'll limit it down to Mark I. So now I'm working with 60. Put that in a splitter, we split it in half. Here's 30, here's 30. If I take this 30 and split it all three ways, there's 10, 10, and 10. So 30, 40, 50. There's the 50 going off into the train station that I can use for the future projects. 10 goes this way. And now I have 160 for my heavy modular frames. And for the heavy modular frames, as you can see the bright yellow sinks that I've got here, what I did was throw on some smart splitters. So there's a couple different ways you could do this. One way would be just to set this to overflow, and that way everything will fill up, but that way the process behind it won't back up and you don't have to worry about clearing out belts and machines and all that sort of stuff if you want to see the steady flow on your belt. So that would be one option, but then everything else is still going to be, overloaded inside the blueprints, right? So what I'm going to do is I just have these set for any and then none and none. Now I know I could just delete this belt and do that. The advantage of having the smart splitter on here is when you snap it onto a belt like this. But the nice thing is when I delete it, it repairs the belt like it's nothing there. So I'm going to have everything go into the awesome sink. And I've got 2 of these, so I don't need it for all 4. And the reason for it is concrete stacks to 500, and these actually don't need that much concrete. And so I've got plenty of time before the machines fill up on that. The modular frames are just the ones that take forever. They're the ones that have the longest startup time, mainly because the reinforced iron plates are kind of slow to start up. The encased industrial beams only stack to 100, and they come in at a pretty high amount, and so that fills up all of these machines super quickly. Because the steel pipes come in at a real high amount, and they're one of the first things to finish, so they're going to show up really quickly. I need an awesome sink for those ones too. So I'm basically just doing this for the encased industrial beams and the steel pipes. The concrete won't back up, so I don't have to worry about those. Once the modular frames make it into the load balance system, all I have to do is just select all of this and just delete it. And all of a sudden, everything else will just flow right in here and we'll get the heavy modular frames made. Merging all of these up were really easy. Just grouped up 2 of these, send those behind and into this merger, and then group up all of these together. Because in total, I am making 60. 36 are going to go onto the Fused Modular Frames, whereas 24 are going to go to the train station for that future project. So for that, I just did a 5-way split, and since I've already got a merger here, well, might as well use it. Because the initial amount coming in from this and this belt would be 60, this needs to be Mark II, because this needs to be able to hold that extra 20%. This is the first splitter, so that's half, and this is half. So since this is the part that's looping back, this right here is 3/5, which would be 36. So this one, we've got 2 of them grouped together, so here's our 24. And then this is the part that loops back to that merger. Nice and easy load balancing. We've got the aluminum coming up over here. Here's the heavy modular frames. And then just like I said, I did the fuel into pipes and then I already turned it on. I think you guys have seen me make fuel a couple times by now. That little setup wasn't anything exciting. And it just worked. So that's always nice. I'm sure I just completely glossed over something that I wanted to talk about, but at this point I can't remember. This build has been taking me a little while, but that's okay. I really enjoy the big builds because watching it all come to life is really fun. So let's do that. Let's head downstairs and get this party started. All right, so let's delete this. this, and this. Sometimes after I do stuff like this, I like to just take out some, like, it's clearly kind of doing that stop and start thing. So I just clear out the extra real quick, and yeah, there we go. Alright, so I wanted to make sure that was off and on its way. Honestly, the rubber has quite a far ways to go, and this next part gets going pretty quick. So if we take a look at our priority switches, let's go ahead and put this in here. I swear, eventually I'm going to find these and delete them all. Thankfully, I know where those are. So aluminum we're going to do last, because that's super quick. So this one gets turned on, the other one gets turned off. Perfect. Let's go watch them. Now that the modular frames are here and being sent through the load balancing, now we can get the rest of this started. Let's go ahead and start with the encased industrial beams. Go ahead and delete that. And there they go. And now let's send in the pipes. Because the heavy modular frames have a bit of a journey on their slow Mark 1 belts, and I want to make sure that these machines are on at 100%, I'm going to wait for each of the blenders to have just a couple of the heavy modular frames first, and then I'm going to turn on the aluminum. Time for the handy dandy priority power switch again, and now we can go ahead and turn these awesome sinks off. And that's the last part to get up to 100%. So now, this is going to take a little while to get all the way to the train station. No, it's just right there. It's still a ways away. Yep, all the blenders are staying on. Perfect. That's 36 fused modular frames. We just head right over here. We've got our two other belts that are headed to the train station. There's the modular frames and the heavy modular frames. This is going to take a little bit to get over the train station, but I am curious to see what my sync points are up to once they do get there, so I'm not going to keep the timer running. I think we can say this is mission complete from here, but I'll give you a rough estimate as to how long it takes to get from here to the train station. Look at all that beautiful progress we just made, just going straight into the wood chipper. It took like over 20 minutes for the fused modular frames to show up down here. But let's take a look. What are we up to with sync points? Oh, holy cow. Well, we got there. I've got my 1,000. Whoa, that's what I'm talking about. All right, so we are steadily over 6 million, hovering between 6.3 and 6.6. That's, yeah, 6.6, 6.3. Cool. So pretty close to averaging 6.5 million points per minute. That is not too shabby. Now that I can finally afford it, I'm gonna have to find a place to put that golden nut. But I think this video has been long enough, so let's do that in the next one. And that is gonna do it for this one. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. I know this one was quite the journey. So I might split up the next one to try to make these just a little bit shorter. And it'll be time to ramp up electronics. So look forward to that. And thanks for watching.